on the command line, some things we want to take a look at with the command line is the prompt that you see. This prompt indicates that I am a normal user. What indicates that I'm a normal user on this system and not root? A couple obvious things. Nope, the tilde does not. Well, one, Aaron identifies that I'm user Aaron and not root. What other thing indicates? The $sign. Yes. So if I switch user using the su space dash command and type in the root user account, now I'm a user root, which you can see from the prompt here, and the pound symbol shows that I have now privileged rights to type commands. And to exit out of being root, I just type exit. So as you see, the su command switches user. That's what it's short for. Su is switch user. And then I put a space in there. This is not required, but I personally like to use it because this space and then the hyphen indicate to give me root's environmental settings. The environmental settings are the search path. So when I type a command, it looks in the root's search path for all of the directories that hold all of the commands. One of those is ifconfig, and on some Linux systems, if you type ifconfig to get the IP address configuration for the interfaces, it doesn't always work. You have to actually type the full path of the ifconfig command, which is /sbin/ifconfig. So this is typing the command is ifconfig, and the directory where the ifconfig command is located on this Linux box is in the sbin folder.
So when would you have to do /sbin when you're out of your own folder?
No. I would type the full path of the command when I'm not a root user. Some Linux distributions will not allow you to execute commands in the sbin folder unless you are root.
But in this case, we can't.
In this case, in this particular distribution that we're using, we can just type ifconfig and it works. But in some, you can't. So therefore, that's where the sudo command comes in, because sudo is super user do, and then you type the command ifconfig, and it prompts you for your password to execute this command as a root user. So I type my password and enter, and now it shows me my IP address for my Ethernet 0 interface. Or I can use the su command space dash to switch to the root account. And then I don't have to worry about prefixing the ifconfig command with the directory that it's located in or the sudo command. I can just type ifconfig and everything works just hunky-dory.
So if you're not sure if it allows it, just do the...
Right. Or just know, if you are a normal user, if you want to type ifconfig, you might have to use the full path because the full path is not in the search environment. And we'll look at that a little later on, understanding our user environment and the preferences that are currently set for search path, and a few other settings and variables that are set for that user. So again, to get out of, right now I'm logged in as root, it's indicated with the pound symbol at this prompt. And I type exit, and it takes me back to my session where I am the user Aaron. And the command to clear the screen and start over nice and fresh is clear, clear. Hit enter. Now, if I want to see all the commands that I've typed in the past, because there was one command that was really difficult to figure out, and I looked it up and researched it, and I got the right variables and the right options and the right dash R's, dash F's, and I laid it out just right and it worked. But it was a week ago and I forgot what that command was. What command can I type to show me all those previous commands I typed? History. Whoa, it just went through and showed me all of my commands. There's over almost 600 of them. So how can I use this history command, but showing one page at a time so I can go through what I'm looking at? Pipe more. So I type the command history space the pipe, which is above my enter key, and then the command more. So what that's going to do is it's going to take the standard output of history and put it as standard input for the more command. So now I hit enter, and it shows me one page at a time, starting at my first command I used on this system, all the way down to whatever fits on one page of my terminal screen. I keep hitting the space bar, and it takes me page by page. I hit the enter key, and it takes me line by line. And if I want to get out of this without going through all 600 commands, I hit the Q on the keyboard, and it will quit out of the more command. So that is the history command, and using the history command, so we can send the standard output of the history command to the input of the more command. So if more is more, what's less than more? Less. Less. So I use the less command. The benefit of using less is that it allows me to move not only just down through the page of information, but also back up. So if I do a directory listing of my etc folder, which contains what? Anybody want to make a guess on that? All my configuration settings, all my configuration files. So if I just do an ls of my /etc directory, it's a long listing, right? It goes off the screen. But if I use this same command, space, and I pipe it to less, hit enter, now I can pay arrow up and arrow down through, hit the space bar, arrow up, arrow down through all of the files in this directory. And of course when I'm done, I hit Q. And that's why less is more, because it gives you more features. Okay. Now, let's say I want to take a look at my SSH configuration file. The SSH configuration file for the SSH service that's running on my workstation here is actually stored in the etc folder. That is ls/etc/sshd/sshd SSH and then sshd config. There we go. I had the wrong directory listing. So ls/etc/ssh/sshd_config. So that's the file that I just did a directory listing on, and it says, yep, that file exists. How do I look at the contents of that file? Using the cat command. The cat command, so cat/etc/ssh/sshd_ hit the tab key, so it automatically completes the name of the file, hit enter, and I don't have permission. So,
what does the cat stand for anyway?
Concatenate. Cat stands for concatenate. Good question. So how do I give myself permission in order to view this? I put sudo in front of this. So I'll hit the up arrow key to repeat my command, arrow to the beginning, and type sudo space, and then the command that I was trying to execute in the first place. It's going to prompt me for my password. Now, in order to do a sudo, I need to be a sudoer. And in order to be a sudoer, during the installation of Fedora, we check that little box that says add me to the administrators group, or I would have to add me to the group, to the wheel group. And we'll get into that when we get into understanding users and groups. Or I need to be in the sudoers file. So here it is, and it just went off the screen. How do I display the contents of this command, or sorry, this text file with the cat command, and only see one page at a time, but be able to go back up and down through the command using the less command again? So repeat the command, hitting the up arrow key, pipe space less, and that will allow me to view this command line one page at a time, but be able to scroll down through it until I find what I'm looking for in order to see the setting that I need. And when I'm done looking at this file, how do I get out of this less program? Q takes me back to the command prompt.
Yeah, you have to remember to hit space after you get the colon. Right?
Colon.
When you type less, you come to a colon. Colon.
No, so if you take a look at the command line that I have here, sudo space. So sudo is the command.
No, I'm saying.
The variable for this is cat and the name of the file, and then I need another space. I use the pipe symbol, and then another space, and then the less command.
I know, but then once you do that, you get a colon.
Yes, so when I do that, I get that colon at the bottom.
And you have to hit space.
I can hit the space bar, that's right, to take me page by page, because I'm actually inside of the less program right now, viewing the output from the cat command. Yes, okay, now I understand what you were talking about. I can actually use, on some keyboards and some distributions, the page up and page down commands on our keyboard keys. And when I'm at the end or when I'm done looking, I hit Q to quit out of the less program.
Well, if you're already at the top, you can't go up. You go one line down.
So now, let's say that there was something in this file, in the SSHD config file, that I wanted to find, but my eyes just could not narrow in on. I could not see it in that configuration. But I know there's a line in there about something to do with root, being able to log in through SSH. So the word root is in there somewhere. I just don't know where it is or what the setting is set to, which is what I'm looking for. Is root allowed to log in through SSH? So I know it's in there, I just couldn't find it. My eyes couldn't find it. So I used the program grep. Grep grabs the stuff out of the standard output. So again, when I run this command without the less, the output of this command gets displayed to the screen, correct? That is called the standard output. I want to now redirect that standard output to another command that's going to process or do something with it as its input. So let's go over it one more time. So when I type this command, sudo, its input, standard input, is the command and the variable that I want it to execute, right? And the cat command, standard input, is the directory that I want it to concatenate and the file I want it to concatenate. Does that make sense? And then the cat command's standard output, which gets displayed to the screen, is the information I see here. Correct? That's the idea behind standard input and standard output. stdin, stdout. So now I want to use the grep command. The grep is going to take the output of one command and put it into the grep command. And the grep looks for a series of strings of characters. That's the most common use of grep. So I'm going to repeat this command, sudo cat etc ssh sshd config, space, use the pipe to redirect the output of this command to the input of the grep command, and I'm going to grep for the string root. And that should now only show me the line that has the word root on it. There it is.
So it's just a search.
Ch root directory none. That's the setting which is inside of this directory listing somewhere. And if I scroll up and look through it with my eyes,
Yeah, it's
Might
nice.
be some-
Searching the out.
notice it didn't pick this up. Why?
Case sensitive.
Ah, it is case sensitive. So it only picked up on the lowercase root. And I can't even see with my eyeballs, but it's in there somewhere. So if I repeat this command using an uppercase root, or uppercase R, I get 2 lines. Permit root login, yes. The setting of the permit root login without password. So that's another option. So that's where root exists with the capital R.
Could you tell it to search root with capital R and at the same time do
Yes,
lowercase?
that is an additional variable of grep that you can use. So how do I get help with the command grep? Man grep. And there's an option here for, I think it might be -E here.
Pipe less.
Ignore case -I. Yep. So if I use this command -I, look for root, that shows me all 3 lines with root as capitalized and root as lowercase. So again, the additional option there was grep space -I space root. See how I use the man page or the manual page in order to get information on how to use that grep command? Yes.
Manual pages are sometimes quite long. You do a pipe less and flip through.
The manual page actually executes a manual program. So you go into the program and you can interact with it just like the less command. So you type man grep,
Yes,
I
it's
can
already
hit the
set up.
page down,
Sure.
page up or up arrow,
Yep.
down arrow,
So
and then when I'm done I hit Q or H to get more information where I can look for a string of characters inside of that. Yep. Now I want to look for all the files in my etc directory that end with config.
asterisk.
I can use the wildcard asterisk. So I do an ls/etc /star config. And that gives me a directory listing using the wildcard. What the wildcard does, though, is it shows me anything that starts with any character, any number, but ends with config. And what I'm seeing here is the actual files and directories.
So it's showing extensions within what's actually,
This is not an extension.
or not extensions, but it's showing
It's showing me both directories and files.
a file within that directory.
Because there is a, yes, there is a directory that has it in there as well. So if I want to look for just .old, I would need to use the same command. We'll put a dot in there, old. So that way it has to include the dot. The dot is an actual ASCII character that's naming the file. Just like we're used to in Windows, having files with names, dot, and extension, there's not always an extension on files in Linux. You see this? There's no such file or directory. And even though we saw it here, this happened to be a file inside of a directory that had config at the end of it. You see the difference? What's happening here? So the what I'm looking at here, these files I'm looking at here, are not only files that end with CONFG, but they are a directory listing of a directory with the last 6 characters of CONFIG.
So that'll pull up its files.
So that'll pull up the files inside of that directory by doing this. Because I'm doing a directory listing of the directory something 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 config. Yes?
What is, just out of curiosity, what is the .old as a file?
.old as a file is probably some script that changed the settings of that text file, and as a little backup, it just created an .old copy of it. So a backup. It's essentially just a backup.
Kind of like the Windows
Yep.
old.
It was modified or updated with a patch. If I did the sudo yum updates and updated all the software, there might have been a line that they added to a configuration file, and instead of totally overwriting that configuration file, which you could have had some settings in that you were using, they just rename it to .old and then put the new configuration file with the new lines for whatever variable or patch they needed to do. Does that make sense?
Like when you update Windows, it does the same thing. It gets a Windows.old.
Yeah, Windows.old. Yep, it'll add the .old in there, so it's nice. Okay, so now if I want to execute a command and put it in the background, remember how to do that one? Background, foreground?
BG.
Yes. So, if I want to use, trying to think of a good example here. The, like gedit, and that we use a graphical program that we can run just so we can get a visual of what's happening here. So I'm going to use gedit. I hit enter, and that opens up the little gedit graphical program, correct? If I go back to the command line, my command line is, I can't do anything because it's essentially taken over by the gedit program. Control Z, or if I close out of the gedit program, it now gives me back my command prompt. If I execute gedit again and use that Control Z option, so if I got to go back to the command line, Control Z, it now has put gedit in the background, and I can't use it. I'm trying to click around and it's not working. So I type FG to put it back in the foreground, so now I can use it. Okay, let me quit this program. And that gives me back my command prompt. How do I execute the gedit program and put it in the background right away? Gedit, use the ampersand symbol. So now it is running in the background, but I can still interact with it. And I have my prompt back.
When you do it normally, so that way you can only use one or the other, are they like sharing the same sector on the RAM then? Is that what causes that to really happen, or?
No, my understanding is that when you execute this command, just like if I were to do an ls-r /, whoops. Right now, I don't have my command prompt back. And what it's doing is it's doing a directory listing of everything on my Linux system. So I don't have my command. I can't type any commands because this command, the ls command, is still running. It's still processing, right? So the same concept goes, if I run gedit, the gedit program is still running, just like that ls was still running, until I'm done with the gedit. Then I'll get my command prompt back. So does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's not using the same memory space, but it's using the same program which is this terminal program.
It's kind of showing it as the same process. Is what
Yes,
it
it would be essentially like a sub-process or a child process. Yep. So it was the terminal prompt that executed or started that sub-process of gedit.
Okay.
Good question. All right. A little bit with the cd, using the cd command. Right now, I'm going to clear my screen. What directory am I in, and how can you tell?
You're in home because of the tilde.
I'm in my home folder, and I can tell because of this tilde. So how do I tell from the command line, though? What command can I use to tell me what directory I'm currently in? pwd, present working directory. And then it shows me the output is /home/Aaron. So I'm in my home directory. So if I want to go back to the home directory, so I want to go up to the parent directory of where I'm at, what do I use to take me there? That is a relative path. ... Yep. So cd to change directory space ... represents the parent directory of the current directory. So now I'm in the home, which is represented here, but I don't know the exact path. This just happens to be the name of the directory I'm in. To get the full path, the absolute path is /home. So now, how do I change directories into my home documents folder? From here, using the cd. Okay, if I do /home, this is called the what? Absolute path, right? This is the full path. Okay, now how do I change into my downloads folder? Downloads folder happens to be inside of the home/Aaron folder. So it's not in the documents folder, it's back a folder. But give me the command that is going to be the relative command to get me there. cd ... downloads. This will take me up a directory to the parent directory and then inside of the downloads directory, which is in there. And if I do a pwd, I can see that I'm in the home Aaron downloads folder. So that's how we can move around. How do I get back to the root of the file system?
Slash.
Using the / change directory space /. It takes me to the root of my file system, which is indicated by just a single slash. If I do an ls, I can see that I'm at the beginning of my file system, and that's where I have all of my tools, all my directories that are created there by default. Okay. Next, if I want to take a look at a log file, and the log file is in my var/logs directory, and it's the messages log file. But I only want to see the first few lines.
First 10 lines.
I want to see just the head of it. Head / var/log/ messages. And I don't have permissions, so I need to precede this command with sudo. And now it's only showing me the first few lines all the way back from March 18th, which is today, actually. So the commands that were actually, logs that were actually recorded at the beginning of today when the system got turned on. So how do I look at the last few commands? I'm sorry, last few lines of this. If I'm looking at the head, I want to look at the tail. And there's the last few lines of it. Notice the time is at 1:10. And if I scroll up, the lines here started out at 1:07. And now I want to take a look at and monitor the latest activity of my secure log file, because it's going to tell me anytime somebody authenticates or connects to my system.
Give me those sheets back.
So the command I'm going to use is tail, because that's going to show me the last few lines. But if anything changes in that file, I want to follow those changes. -F. So I'm going to use the tail command, and I'm going to monitor the secure file, the secure log file, but I'm going to use the variable -F. So it's going to be tail -F, and then the name of the file. Execute that, and it's going to stay put here, the last few lines. And you see what the last few lines have been recording? The user Aaron executed this command. You should know about this. This should be logged and audited. Here's my head command that I used. Here's my tail command that I used. So now if I open up another terminal prompt, so I'm going to go File, open up another tab over here, and I'm going to type, actually let me not open up another tab, I'm going to open up another terminal prompt. So there's another window out of the way. We'll put it up here so we can see what's going to happen. Watch in the background when I type sudo ls /. Type my password, watch what happens in the background. It actually recorded that the user Aaron executed the command ls of the root folder. So that is a way, and that's the command that I actually executed here. That is a way to actually see and monitor it live exactly what's happening in my system right now, and anything gets recorded to the secure folder. So I'm going to exit out of that. And how do I stop this tail program from following this file? Control-C. Yep. And that breaks the tail command, so it forces it to quit. And now I'm back at my normal prompt. How do I create a file that has no contents? Touch. So I'm going to change directory to my home directory so I have permissions to do this. So I'm going to type touch test.txt. And now if I do an ls-l, I can see there is a test.txt file with 0 bytes for size. We just created today at 11:14. Now, this file right here, this name executable, actually has bytes in it, but I want to update the date and time of this name file to right now. I want to make it current. What command do I use? Touch. Touch name. Now do another ls-l, and I can see name now has today's current date and time. It didn't zero it out because it didn't have to create a new file. The file already existed, but it updated it with the right date and time of currently right now.
Is there any way to echo text into a text document which you've already created?
Yes, so here's the test.txt file. The question was, how do I get text from whatever I have right now and add it to the test.txt file? I can use the echo command, but I can redirect it. Instead of using pipe, I use a redirector called a greater than sign. I can use a greater than sign to take the text I want to add to the file, and it will create a file with just a single greater than sign. Using two greater than signs will append it to the end. So, if I do this command, ls-l, I'm going to get a directory listing just like this, correct? But if I use the redirector and redirect it, so a greater than sign, of course putting a space before it and a space after, and then type test.txt, I'm going to take the list and now put it inside of the test file.